Dear YouTube video friends and viewers, please first of all subscribe to my channel, let you know my new videos. Welcome Mr. Daniel Yukvar, how are you?
Thank you, I'm doing very well.
What is today's subject?
Today's subject, we will talk about how did the disciples of Jesus die.
Yes, you can talk, here.
Okay. As you know, Jesus had 12 disciples, and after Jesus died, these 12 disciples went all over the world preaching the gospel. And most of them died as a result of their travels and ministry in the areas that they went to. I think John was probably the only disciple that died a normal death. But first of all, I'll talk about Peter and Paul. Peter was a disciple. Paul was not really a disciple, but both of them died in Rome about 66 A.D. Under the persecution of the Emperor Nero. Paul was beheaded. Paul wrote about half of the New Testament, and he was beheaded for the sake of Christ in his testimony. Peter was crucified, and he requested to be crucified upside down because he did not feel like he was worthy to be crucified in the same manner as Christ. And so when he requested to be crucified upside down, they did that for him. So Peter and Paul both died about 33 or 34 years after the death of Christ. And so we see that both of them apparently died in the city of Rome. Next person I want to talk about, and in fact, I want to just mention one thing when I'm on Peter. Peter, in John 21:18, Jesus told Peter that he would die in a way that was not pleasing to him. John 21, I want to read a verse there for you. Jesus had told Peter to go feed my sheep. That meant that he wanted Jesus to go out and tell people about Christ. And John 21:18, it says this. Verily, verily, I say unto you, Jesus is talking to Peter. He says, when thou wast young, thou girdest thyself and wouldest and walkest where thou wouldest. But when thou shalt be old, thou shalt stretch forth thy hands, and another shall gird thee and carry thee where thou wouldest not. This spoke he, signifying by what death he should glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said unto him, follow me. So Jesus here tells Peter that he's going to die a death that's not pleasant. He's predicting how he would die, is exactly what it was talking about. And this actually happened to most of the disciples. John is the one example of a disciple who died a natural death and from old age. He was the leader of the church at Ephesus, and he took care of Jesus' mother, Mary, after Jesus was killed. During Domitian's persecution in the middle 90s, John was exiled to the island of Patmos. And that's where he wrote the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation. And according to an early Latin tradition, John was boiled alive and yet escaped unhurt. We don't know if this is true or not. This is a legend that was said. But and there's no exact date known for his death, but it's assumed to be somewhere between 89 AD and 120 AD. Another one of the disciples of Jesus was Andrew. And Andrew went to the land of the man-eaters, which is now what we know as the Soviet Union. And he was the first one to proclaim Jesus and the gospel of Christ to that land. He also preached in Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey, and in Greece. And he is said to have also been crucified. There's no exact date that we know of where this happened, but it was said that he was crucified on an X-shaped cross by a Roman proconsul at Patria in Achaia. This is where he died, on an X-shaped cross. The next disciple is Philip. He preached in Scythia, which is the Ukraine today. He had also a powerful ministry in northern Carthage in Africa. And he was put to death by being crucified on a tall cross. And he died, he preached in Phrygia, and he died in Hierapolis. Next is Bartholomew. He had a widespread missionary travels in India and also in Armenia, Ethiopia, and southern Arabia. There are various accounts as to how he died, but one tradition says that he was flayed alive in Armenia. Then Matthias. Acts 1:26 tells how Matthias was one of the disciples which was chosen to replace Judas, who betrayed Christ. And tradition, the church tradition, says that he went to Syria, and then he lived as an ambassador for many years. He is also there's reason to believe that he stayed in Jerusalem for 15 years, and then he went to the Persians, the Parthians, and the Medes as a missionary. And then eventually he died as a martyr in Ethiopia. Next is Thomas. Thomas is probably most active in the eastern part of Syria. And the tradition says that he went as far as India, and the Mar Thoma Christians revere him as their founder. And the legend has it that he was pierced through with the spears of 4 soldiers. And so the Latin Church celebrates his martyrdom in Persia or India on December 21st. Then James. This is the son of Alphaeus. He is one of the least 3 Jameses that is referred to in the New Testament. And it seems like he probably went into Syria. The Jewish historian Josephus reported that he was stoned and then clubbed to death. So James, he's the son of Alphaeus. We know that he lived at least 5 years after the death of Christ, because this is mentioned in the Bible. But according to tradition, it seems that he was thrown down from the temple by the scribes and the Pharisees. Then he was stoned, and then were dashed out with a fuller's club. Then James, the son of Zebedee. His death was done by Herod Agrippa I shortly after the day of Passover in the year 44, or 11 years after the death of Christ. Acts chapter 12, verse 2 says that he was killed by a sword. And then, and some people claim that he was the first bishop of Spain. Then Simon the Zealot. One story suggests that Simon was the bridegroom at the wedding of Cana. Some stories suggest that Simon ministered in Persia and was killed refusing to sacrifice to the sun god. He's also known as Simon the Canaanite. But we don't have any definite information in the Bible or by tradition as to when or where he might have been killed. Matthew. Some stories suggest that Matthew ministered to Persia, Macedonia, Syria, Parthia, Media, and Ethiopia. Some of the oldest reports say he was not martyred, while some say that he was stabbed to death in Ethiopia. Then Jude. Jude, according to tradition, it's taught that he lived in Armenia, Syria, and Persia, where he was martyred. Tradition tells us that he was buried in KİLİSE, which is now in Iran. Some suggest that he belonged to a revolutionary group called the Zealots. And then I just want to say a brief word about Judas Iscariot. He's the one who betrayed Christ, and according to the Bible, he betrayed Jesus with a kiss in Matthew 24, 47, 56. And he hanged himself. In Matthew 27:5, we see it. He hanged himself in a place called Al-Qamodah, the southern slope of the valley of Hinnom near Jerusalem. And then he fell down from a precipice and was dashed into pieces. Some scholars suggest that he was from Kerioth and that he was a member of the Zealot sect called the Sicarii, who were dagger-bearing assassins. So this is a brief outline of all 12 of the disciples plus Judas. And we see that nearly all of these disciples who followed Jesus ended up dying as martyrs for the sake of Christ. So that gives you a summary of all 12 of the disciples. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much for your talking.